why is determining who your ideal customer is such an important decision to make? And how, once we know who they are and all that business, how do we determine how to find them? How do we get where they're at? Why is this such a big deal? Oh, I don't know. Only because it's how you stay in business. Let's dig into this. Welcome back to the show, the Business Mastery for Startups and Scaleups with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. Today in episode 15, with my incredibly smooth intro, this should be clear, we're going to look at what an ideal customer is. We're going to learn how to find them, we're going to learn more about them, and how to talk to them. So let's start with, I suppose, the most important part. What is an ideal customer? Very simply, it's somebody who you want to work with, who has the budget for your product or service, that you can work with better than the competition, and ideally for a very long time. Whether that's that they utilize your service for a long period of time, or that they buy and rebuy your product over a significant period of time. Regardless, again, it's someone you can serve better than most that's compatible with your business goals long term. So now that we understand what it is, why is that important? Well, very simply, the difference between a customer you can serve and a customer you can serve well may not be a big distance, but that gulf is surprising in its depth. In business, there are many problems that never get solved because they're not big enough to hit the threshold of a client's desire to get past entropy and resolve them. And when they do, they want the person that can do it the best in the least amount of time for the least amount of resources. And the more targeted you are in your messaging, in your interaction, in your engagement, and in the packaging of your product or service to those issues, the more likely you are to be the one that's selected. So again, specialization in this area is hugely relevant, especially as a startup or a small business where our resources to engage and to market are typically so much smaller than the companies that we compete against. Very often, our entire company is smaller than the marketing team for some of these behemoths that we come up against. So that really can be just an enormous game changer for us. So once we've identified who that is, there's some things that we really want to understand. Let me take this one step further, actually, before I even go on. Once we identify who this is, there's some things that we can do that really can be helpful. And the first thing is to look at our existing current customer base, if we've been in business for a period of time, and look for characteristics that I've just described in our existing customers. I'd be surprised if you've been in business for a period of time, if at least a meaningful portion of your customer base doesn't fall into the category I've described. If they do, you have a huge leg up because you can use some real world examples. If you don't, then you need to do what I'm just about to describe and run through this exercise to figure out, where they are and all that business. But even if you do have that benefit of a few years worth of building up a customer list, I still think you should go through this exercise and then apply what you learn to your existing customers to ensure that they're seeing you the way that you want to be seen. So once we've identified this group and we determined who they are, let's look at this. What are their buying habits? First question. So when you're engaging with them, how do they go about buying? Is it through a committee? Is there a decision process that takes a period of time? Are there particular titles in that company or in those companies that you engage with more often than not? So in my world, I help small businesses and startups to consistently attract, recruit, and retain the top talent in their market, and then form those folks into highly performing teams. So I'm typically talking to the founder or to the leadership team, because those are the folks in very early stage companies who make leadership training decisions, recruitment decisions, and employer brand marketing decisions. In bigger companies, that would be a different group of people. Probably it would be the director of HR, the CHRO, It could also be, if I'm talking more about leadership training, it could also be an executive team. So again, understanding the buying habit of my ideal customer lets me know who to interact with. And in the example I just gave, those are two different groups. So if I didn't know who my ideal customer was and how they buy, I very well may spend an enormous amount of time in marketing dollars targeting the wrong group. The second thing that you want to understand is what they're trying to achieve and what they're afraid of. So your customer might be trying to, for example, increase the efficiency of their accounting department. They realize that the way they're doing things now is inefficient. It's costly both in dollars and time resources. So knowing that, you know how to package your services or product again, quite obviously if you're in that space. But what are they afraid of? They might be in a tenuous financial position and they're afraid of long-term commitments. Or maybe they're afraid of a big initial investment. Whatever that fear is, the better that you understand that, you can ensure that you don't accidentally stoke those fears in the way that you package your product, create your marketing, or engage with your buyers. So understanding both what they're trying to achieve, what their goals are, and what they're afraid of empowers you to market more effectively to them. Another important question to ask is, how do they make those buying decisions? I mentioned the buying habits before, but how do they make those decisions? Who is on that buying committee? What are their goals? What are their fears? The better that you understand that, once again, the better that you're able to create your marketing materials and to handle your outreach. When you're doing that, what is their process? Do they typically do an initial conversation followed by a product or service demonstration, followed by an internal meeting that you're not invited to? Is there then a follow-on Q&A and then a decision? Or is it a one and done? These things can be determined sometimes by the size of your product or your service, sometimes by how long they expect to be engaged with you, and sometimes, again, just by their own internal processes. So that's a very, very important thing to understand. How do they buy? Next, once we understand these things, where do these people congregate? So are there associations that your standard buyer typically is involved with? So in the government contracting space, it might be associations like AFCEA or NDIA. Government buyers go to these conferences held by this association. They appear in webinars. They write articles in their magazines, and by doing that, you get access to them. So knowing that if that were your target market, you would want to join associations like that. Is there a very active LinkedIn user group where they tend to congregate? Is LinkedIn where they tend to congregate? Is there a different industry periodical where they're consistently at? Is there a podcast or group of podcasts where they are interviewed or engage or get their material from? This will give you an idea of how to target your outreach. So we know what to say by understanding their goals and their fears, but now we know where to spread that message to. And then, how do they communicate? So a government buyer probably communicates quite a bit differently than the CIO of a mid-sized company, who probably communicates pretty differently than an infrastructure manager at a large organization or a plumbing association. These are different folks with different backgrounds. Understanding how they communicate is key. So in doing this exercise, we've taken the very important question of who is our ideal customer, understood that so we know where and how to expend our marketing and sales efforts to bring in a customer that we want to work with and who is very likely to stick with us for a long period of time because they have the budget and the desire to work with us, our service, and our product. We've looked at where they're located. We've looked at how to communicate with them based on their goals and their fears. And we've determined what we should be saying to them by learning how they communicate. Now, one more important thing here to remember is that the best way into any organization is always a referral. So as you're doing exceptional work with these folks, try to get referred to other companies that do something very similar that meet your criteria as your ideal customer. Now, one last quick note before we wrap up. We want to stay within our ideal customer zone as much as we can. But that doesn't mean that you should walk away from business that isn't ideal customer, as long as your product or service provides exceptional value, their budget matches what you need it to be worth your time, and they interact with you in a way that works for your long-term business plans. So understand that you want to focus your marketing and sales energy into the center of your ideal customer zone, but that doesn't mean necessarily you're going to turn down business that's not inside it, as long as it hits those criteria. So now we've answered these questions. We not only know who our ideal customer is, but we know where they are, what they want, how they talk, and how to buy. The important thing for you to do is go out and sell to them now. So enough listening to me talk. You go out and sell your incredible product or service, and come back and listen to us another day after you've done that. Thanks for listening, as always. From the Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with me, Jerry Gadori, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.